other.
Hello and welcome to the March 17th edition of the Bub Reports. This week, we try to make sense of the ruling in favor of Jamaican dancehall artist Vybz Kartel, who is imprisoned in his home country. Cartel was convicted to a life sentence for the 2011 murder of Clive Lizard Williams. The criminal charges also included conspiracy to murder and the illegal possession of a firearm. The Jamaican dancehall star has now won an appeal of his conviction due to juror misconduct in the original trial. A Jamaican appeals court will now decide whether the musician and his co-defendants will again stand trial. The trial of Vybz Kartel and his co-defendants lasted 64 days and was one of the longest in Jamaican history. During the trial, one juror allegedly tried to bribe other jurors to return not guilty verdicts, but the alleged briber was not dismissed from the case. In overturning the convictions, the Privy Council ruled that allowing the questionable juror to stay on the jury was fatal to the safety of the convictions that followed and infringed on the defendant's fundamental right to a fair hearing.
Allowing juror X to remain on the jury is fatal to the safety of the convictions which followed. It was an infringement of the appellant's fundamental right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution. Thirdly, the judge should have considered whether the remaining jurors might have become, consciously or unconsciously, prejudiced for or against one or more of the appellants as a result of juror X's behaviour. For example, there was a danger that the attempted bribe could have made the other jurors overcompensate, consciously or unconsciously, if they assumed that the offer must have come from one of the appellants and that therefore they must be guilty. For these reasons, the appellant's appeals should be allowed. The court is now adjourned.
Later on our program, we continue our conversation on some of the tumultuous events that informed the lead-up to the Grenada Revolution of 1979 and the subsequent political reprisals that followed in the aftermath of the March 13th events. One of the underreported events of the Grenada Revolution was the murder of 5 Grenadian citizens on November 17th and 18th, 1980. In Plain St. Patrick's. The 5 men, Donald and Dennis Stanislaus, Andy Courtney, and Stephen Lousy. The funeral of the 5 men was later held under heavy surveillance by the People's Revolutionary Army, but their killers remain at large 43 years later. We welcome our guests, Ruggles Ferguson, constitutional attorney, Margaret Lousy, Grenadian diaspora resident in the United Kingdom, Esther Humphrey, trade unionist and former activist of the Grenada Revolution, and Ras Logi, member of the Rastafarian movement imprisoned between 1979 to 1983. Here now is our host, Dr. Kellon Bubb, with this week's editorial titled, Impending Lawsuit Against Grenada, Not Without Precedent. We thank you for joining us.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to this week's edition of the Bub Report. I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellon Bubb. Now, the news this week that the family of Ralph and Kathy Brandel intends to sue the state of Grenada following their gruesome murder should not come as a surprise to anyone. In fact, their actions are not without precedent in Grenada and the OECS. Last year, citizen Dowlin Alexander filed a lawsuit against the Commissioner of Police and the Attorney General in Dominica, seeking close to 1,000 EC dollars in damages. Alexander was arrested based on a notice issued by Interpol on behalf of the French government. He was kept in a holding cell at a Dominica police station without being formally charged. In 2019, St. Lucian Danny George sought special general aggravated and exemplary damages against members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force for assault and battery, false imprisonment, and malicious prosecution. Now, while the judge in that case did not find the arresting officers liable for these charges, George was awarded over 1 million EC dollars for loss of income, for repayment of medical expenses, and pain, suffering, and loss as a result of the assault that was meted out by the officers in this matter. And in 2012, of course, who can forget that the family of Grenadian Oscar Bartholomew of blessed memory, who was brutally beaten to death by Grenadian law enforcement during a visit to the state, won a $1 million wrongful death lawsuit against the government of Grenada for his wrongful death. Now, many wrongful death lawsuits come after criminal trials. Wrongful death actions are civil lawsuits and are a type of personal injury claim. They use similar evidence to criminal cases, but have a lower standard of proof. Someone found liable for wrongful death may or may not be convicted of criminal charges arising from the same death. In a wrongful death action, the jury can determine the size of the damages awarded after hearing the evidence from both the complainant and the defendant. The jury's determination or the judge's determination may not necessarily be the final word in this matter. The size of the award may be adjusted upward or downward by the court for various reasons. And speaking of matters of legal interest, I'm happy to be joined this week by our very first guest, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, who is going to be telling us about making sense, rather, of a case that has the history of being one of the longest running cases in the English-speaking Caribbean, and that is the Vybz Kartel case, in which a Privy Council awarded judgment in that appeal that was brought to it by the attorneys representing Cartel and the other people convicted in this matter. Mr. Ferguson, welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir. Ruggles, are you hearing us? Ruggles, are you there? Are you hearing us?
Thank you, Kellogg, and good morning. Clearly, you dropped a while in your introduction.
Okay, there does appear to be some internet issues, but we are going to carry on. Are you still hearing us, sir?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. I'm hearing you now.
Okay, yes. Very well. Okay, very well, Ruggles. Welcome to this week's edition of the Bub Report.
Yes, you can go ahead. I'm hearing you if you are hearing me.
Yes. So talk to us about the Vybz Kartel ruling, the implications here in respect for judicial legal practices in the Caribbean. It looks like, Ruggles, we may have to log you off and log you back on. So viewers and listeners, we do apologize.
Okay,
Ruggles,
well, thank you. I heard part of your question, not the last part, because of interference, but I will proceed based on what I think that, yes.
Go ahead. The internet is...
Should I log off?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, please, Ruggles. Go ahead.
Should I log off and log back on?
No, do not log off and log back on. Just go right ahead. Okay, viewers and listeners, we're definitely having some internet issues here with Ruggles. So we're going to have him log off and log back on. But in the meantime, we do encourage you to share this very important live stream so that we can get a sense of what happened in the Vybz Kartel matter here, with Ruggles Ferguson. And later in the program, we are going to be speaking with two people, two citizens of Grenada. Both of them are currently in the diaspora, but who were claimed to be victims of the Grenada Revolution. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Mr. Logie, who was arrested and imprisoned at the Hopevale prison. And another is a family member of a member of the Cadet Corps at the time, who was killed back in 1980. Of course, the family is claiming that the murder occurred against the backdrop of his involvement in the Cadet Corps, and that, in fact, that the revolution may have been implicated in his murder. Of course, no one has been held accountable for his death up to this point. But I'm going to try to get Ruggles back. Ruggles, we are back at you again. Let's see if your internet is any better. All right. Ruggles, go ahead to the question.
Yes.
But clearly, Mr. Ferguson is having some internet issues there emanating from Grenada. So we do apologize for that. And Mr. Ferguson, thank you for tarrying and for being patient. This is not an internet issue on my end. Clearly, there is an issue over there. If you are a Flow customer, I'm being told that, I'm not sure if you are a Flow customer, but I'm being told that may be the issue. But we want to continue with the conversation, Ruggles, and speak to the Vybz Kartel ruling. Now, can you talk about the legal implications of this case? Does it set any kind of legal precedent for any case practice, case law in the Caribbean?
Okay, well, thank you. First of all, the importance of the case really lie with the fair trial principle. All our constitutions, Jamaica Constitution, Grenada Constitution, in our case, Section 8 of our Constitution, mandates that every person tried with a criminal offense shall be afforded a fair hearing within a reasonable time by a competent court established by law. So there are three elements: fair trial, 1, 2, within a reasonable time, 3, by a competent court established by law. And what the Vybz Kartel case re-emphasized really is the importance of the principle of a fair hearing. The Constitution is supreme, and the fair hearing principle is part of the fundamental rights provisions of the Constitution. And as it's said over and over again, a person charged with a criminal offense is deemed to be innocent until proven guilty after a fair trial, or unless that person himself or herself pleads guilty. So that is the broad significance of the case, the importance of fair trial principles.
It speaks to fair trial principles, but it does not assign innocence or guilt in this matter. In other words, the substantive evidence here was not under question, was it? The substantive evidence, rather, that led to the conviction of the defendants. That's Vybz Kartel and the other gentlemen. And yes.
Yes. Well, it was part of the grounds of appeal. There were three broad grounds of appeal. The first ground concerned juror misconduct. The second ground concerned admission into evidence of technology evidence, telecommunication data, that the defendants, appellants, contend ought not to have been admitted by the trial judge, and that telecommunications data, the technology evidence, broadly speaking, was key evidence in the conviction of the appellants. And the third broad general point is that there was undue pressure placed on the jury on the final day of the trial, given that the trial judge had concluded his long summing up. In fact, it was over 400 pages of transcript to the jury, and the jury was allowed to deliberate, go into deliberations close to 4 p.m. That afternoon, about 3:42. And the contention of the defendants was that allowing the jury or inviting the jury to retire at such a late hour placed undue pressure on them to return to a verdict, because at that time people have concerns about getting home and wrapping up the day, a long day, as soon as possible. So there were other grounds, but what the Privy Council decided of these three grounds, the first ground that related to juror misconduct, they felt was sufficient to dispose of the appeal, because they found that given the complaint in relation to a particular juror, whom they referred to as Juror X, the juror was not named, but Juror X, who it was alleged had attempted to bribe the Madam Foreman. The foreman of the jury was female, so he attempted to bribe the Madam Foreman, offering some $500,000 to influence the other jurors to acquit the appellants. And so what the Privy Council found in essence is that the trial judge ought to have discharged the jury at that point in time, because the jury, based on the evidence, would have been contaminated, and as a result, the conviction secured was called into question. And that is really based on the fair trial principle. The Privy Council, because the first ground was sufficient, and that's the ground of juror misconduct, was sufficient to dispose of the appeal. And when I say dispose of the appeal, it was sufficient to lead to the quashing of the conviction. They therefore did not consider and reach a concluded view on the second and third grounds of appeal, which of course would have been important in terms of setting certain important legal principles. But, and that's why I say the first ground rested on the fundamental rights of any accused, and those accused in that particular case, to be afforded a fair trial. And with the contamination of the jury and the fact that no inquiry too was conducted by the judge to see what impact the offer of bribes had on the jurors themselves, and the fact that Juror X was allowed to be part of the 11-panel jury to go in and deliberate on this matter, then they found that it certainly, the verdict was unsafe and unsatisfactory in those circumstances.
So, Counsel here, Counsel Ferguson, I have a question about this. It would appear as if that the trial judge in the case was aware of this particular issue with that particular contaminated juror, shall we say, that the trial judge was aware that that bribe happened. So my question is, why was that juror not relieved of his or her, well, it was a gentleman, his responsibility when that was found out? Is it that the case, was it a matter that the case was so far into its conclusion that it was difficult for them to do that as a judge? How does that work?
Well, important question, Kelon. Very, very important question. But again, the significance of this case, apart from the due process principles, also indicates and confirm the importance of the appellate process. Because the Privy Council, and one may tend to be harsh on the judge himself and say, well, why the judge didn't just release the juror? Well, it was not that simple. And the Privy Council expressed a measure of sympathy for the judge. One, first and foremost, this trial was the longest trial in Jamaica's history. It lasted 64 days. And on the very last day of the trial, the very last day, on the 64th day, this issue arose. So the question for the judge at that time was, should I continue the trial or should I discharge the juror? If the judge discharged the juror, what the effect of it would be to declare mistrial and to order a new trial, simply because there was the maximum 11 jurors required to return a verdict. You needed a minimum of 11. And if that juror was discharged, you then have 10, which would be below the minimum. And therefore, you could not get a verdict with 10 jurors. The trial started off with 12 jurors. And one of those jurors was discharged because of certain issues arising during the trial. So you had already discharged one. And really what it showed, the pressure on the judge at that point in time, and as to whether or not this trial, the 64 days, should go to, want of a better word, to waste, or should I take the chance and continue the trial? Now, what is usually done in circumstances as those is to give a direction, further direction to the jury that would possibly cure any prejudice that may arise in relation to the accused persons. And in fact, the DPP, whom we called in chambers, the defense counsel and the prosecution, to advise, to get their position on it. And the DPP advised that, listen, just give them a direction in terms of their role, a regular direction. And what the Privy Council said is the direction that was given was inadequate. He needed to have referred to the bribery, because in this case, what came out is that apparently all the jurors were approached by this particular juror. And because no headway was made, he then approached the forewoman of the jury to say, listen, I don't have influence. You would have greater influence over me. I offer you $500,000 to do it. By the way, he was arrested and charged and convicted of the offense of attempting to pervert the course of justice and was given a 1-year prison sentence. So that's the issue there. What the Privy Council is saying, to have continued the trial at that point in time constituted a material irregularity sufficient to lead the court to say that this trial was unsafe and unsatisfactory, because here it is at crunch time, you have a jury there that would not be, or is likely to be contaminated to the point where it was felt, it might be felt that the appellants or defendants were behind it, and therefore they might conclude because they are offering a bribe, it means that they are guilty. Or they might want to overcompensate the fact that you're doing that and saying return a verdict and not guilty, it means they're guilty, and therefore we will find them. We will find them guilty. So basically, the Privy Council was saying, without any sufficient guidance, with a special direction given by the judge at that point in time, one, and two, allowing the juror to be part of those final deliberations, that juror X, was dangerous in the circumstances. And so it is on that basis, and that's why I say it addresses the fair trial principle. The evidential aspect of it came in grounds, I think it was grounds 2 or 3. And the evidential aspect of it was admitting technology evidence, the use of cell phones,
the cell phone, yes. So,
the use of cell phone evidence.
You are actually preempting one of the questions I had here, but that's okay, and certainly I want you to get into it. The cell phone, that particular cell phone admitted to evidence also came up as part of that appeal. Why was that the case? Was it because the defense felt as if the cell phone evidence that the state presented was not properly handled or preserved or properly used in evidence in the actual trial?
Yes, there were several issues concerning the cell phone evidence, and among the broader issues of the cell phone evidence is that it was obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act. First and foremost, that the person, the corporal of police who requested that information from Judicial, had no authority to request or to receive it in the first instance. And secondly, it was obtained in breach of the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms in Jamaica regarding the right to privacy. So those were the broad issues, but there were other issues regarding the integrity of that evidence, what you call the chain of custody of those phones. And it was not just one phone. There were, I believe, about 5 cell phones, cellular phones involved. So the conviction or the evidence of the prosecution lay principally in a witness by the name of Mr. Cho, who was what they referred to as the eyewitness evidence. And secondly, the telecommunication evidence. So that was a major chunk of the appeal. But the Privy Council felt that, listen, given that the juror misconduct issue was sufficient to quash the convictions, there was no need to go on to express a concluded view on the other 2 grounds.
That is interesting. So, so what happens now? I mean, it would appear as if, so I was under the impression, at least when this judgment came down, that Cartel was to be free post haste. But the Privy Council did not make that determination. Now that goes back to, as I understand it, Jamaica's highest court of appeal. What happens there now? Is this going to be, obviously it has to be a full retrial, but what happens now in respect of Cartel's custody by the state in prison and the other defendants?
Okay. Again, very important question there, Kellon. first and foremost, the conviction, what the Privy Council has done is to quash the conviction, one, and two, send the matter back to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica to determine whether or not a retrial should take place. So that's the second element. The first element is quashing the conviction. The second element is determining whether or not a retrial should take place. And they have placed that determination squarely at the feet of the Court of Appeal of Jamaica, because as the Privy Council usually says, when they order retrials or when there is any consideration of the ordering of a retrial, the local court is more suited than themselves, have a better knowledge of local conditions to arrive at that determination. Now, had it been simply allowing the appeal by quashing the convictions, then they would have been immediately free, because it means that the matter is at an end. However, based on the second element, which is the determining, they have not ordered a retrial, they have simply asked the Court of Appeal or directed that the Court of Appeal determine whether or not there should be a retrial. So that, in other words, the matter is still a live matter, with the Court of Appeal having to determine this issue. So it's a live matter. Now, so what then arises in a case like this would be, one, whether or not, pending the determination of the hearing by the Court of Appeal as to whether or not a retrial should be ordered, would be whether or not the appellants should be admitted to bail. So what I suspect is that at some point in time, sooner rather than later, the counsel for the appellants will be applying to the court to ask that the clients be released on bail, pending the hearing and determination of this issue.
So that is what you expect, that a bail hearing would occur first, before even questions of the retrial were to occur, or even questions of whatever the appeal court decides.
Yes, certainly, because they are no longer convicted men. The conviction has been quashed, but the matter is not at an end because of that retrial component. So unless the prosecution says, listen, we are not objecting, because remember they were in prison, they would become now remand prisoners awaiting the determination of the Court of Appeal, because their convictions have been quashed. So their status in prison as convicted prisoners would change to one, I suspect, of remand prisoners. And remember, when somebody is charged with a criminal offense, even in its early stages, two considerations arise, especially when it relates to serious offenses, because normally for summary offenses, people are granted bail. And the issue is, one, whether or not that person should be remanded to custody pending trial, and two, whether that person should be admitted to bail. And then having been admitted to bail, then they will turn up voluntarily on the day and dates preserved for their trial. So in a sense, this is what I suspect would be the next stage, an application for bail, because I believe that the what the Court of Appeal may do too is to have what is called a case management hearing probably, and that's mere speculation here, but a case management hearing to say, listen, we have been charged by the Privy Council with the responsibility of determining whether or not there should be a retrial. I want to hear submissions from both sides on this issue. So, and the court might set X date for submissions from the prosecution and Y date for submissions from the defense, or order that submissions be done on the same day and set aside a day for the hearing of the matter. So what the prosecution is expected to do is to say, listen, these are the reasons why we think there should be a retrial. And the defense or the counsel for the appellants would be saying, these are the reasons why we believe that there should be no retrial. And after advancing whatever evidence they have in support by way of affidavit and legal submissions, the court will then determine whether or not there should be a retrial. So I'm saying that wouldn't happen automatically in one day, unless, of course, the prosecution is withdrawing the case against them. But if the prosecution is insisting that there be a retrial, then the Court of Appeal may take a while, certainly within a few weeks at least, to make that determination. In the meantime, the issue is what happens to the appellants. Do they remain in prison, or should they be released pending the hearing and determination of those issues? And so that's why I said that we can probably expect a bail application being made on behalf of the appellants to have them released in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. So that bail application happens, and then of course one can suspect that perhaps the appeals court, in your experience, may decide to throw this case out. And then what happens now with a retrial? And what would that process look like? Especially given the fact that
I suspect that.
Especially, yes. Go ahead, Ruggles.
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. The question here is, given the challenges or the unconstitutional nature in which the data from the cell phone was collected, what would that retrial process look like now? What evidence would the state, I'm sure obviously you may not be privy to what the state may want to present, but do you predict that the state would then call for a retrial in this matter?
Well, it's interesting you put it so, but that is exactly what the appellants were asking the Privy Council to determine. As far as the prosecution is concerned, that evidence, one, was admissible, and two, was properly admitted by the trial judge. As far as the appellants are concerned, that evidence was inadmissible and was not properly admitted by the trial judge. That issue remains up in the air, well, as far as the highest court is concerned, because the Court of Appeal said that it was admissible and it was properly admitted. So the contention was that it was the admission of that evidence violated the Interception of Communications Act. It was obtained in violation of that act and in violation of the constitutional rights of the appellants. But that issue was not determined by the Privy Council. So, if there is a retrial, I would suspect that same evidence, it will be the same evidence to be used. Mm-hmm. And it will mean that there will be an appellate process for determination of that issue unless a judge decides at a new trial not to admit that evidence. And I guess that's part of the reason why the Privy Council made no pronouncements on it, because that certainly would have assisted a court of appeal in determining whether or not there should be a retrial. What I would expect the appellants counsel to be arguing is that these appellants have been in prison for close to 13 years. This allegation, the events leading to these charges, occurred in August, I think on the 16th of August 2011. And that's close to 13 years ago, and the appellants were arrested sometime in September. So, and it turned out to be the longest trial in Jamaica's history. There were 5 accused. At the end of the trial, 1 was freed, leaving the 4 appellants who appealed to the Privy Council. So I would expect that the defense will be heavily relying on the presumption of innocence, 1. So this matter has not been determined, both in the bail application and in the arguments against a retrial, that these men having spent close to 13 years in prison. Is it fair now at this stage to order a retrial in a trial that is expected to last for an extended period of time? So, and that is why too, the Privy Council avoided a determination of it, because that would involve certainly new arguments and even affidavit evidence coming from different sides in order to justify their respective positions.
What does this case tell you? To me, some of the takeaways from this, for me personally, are 1, handling of evidence or the collection of evidence, problems there. 2, issues with procedural. I know that Ruggles, probably you don't like to hear citizens refer to the actions of judicial officers as judicial misconduct. Right? But let us talk about the implications here. Was this a case of gross misconduct on the part of the prosecution, on the part of the state? And at the judicial level, was it also misconduct on the part of the judge, or just negligence in respect of how the matter of this particular juror was handled?
Well, certainly not. And I'm really happy that you asked that question to Kellon, because it again relates to the legal system. Not because a judge is overturned or a court of appeal is overturned means it does not mean that these judges are not don't know the law or committed some act of gross negligence or otherwise. It does not mean so at all. And that is why the 2 things I emphasize here are 1, the importance of fair trial principles. And that is what was emphasized by the Privy Council, notwithstanding the sympathy for the trial judge on the 64th day of the longest trial in Jamaica's history. This matter arises. How does the judge deal with it? Of course, the judge wants to save judicial time. The judge would be under pressure, in a sense, to conclude this matter, and would understand the consequences of taking a decision to declare a mistrial and to discharge the jury at that point. And that's where the importance of the appellate process comes in, because the appellate court would have an opportunity to look at the matter dispassionately in case the judge falls into error, and to reverse the decision of the judge. That judge was an experienced judge. Though you use the term misconduct, that was one of the grounds of appeal in the Court of Appeal by the appellant, saying that there was not judicial misconduct, but prosecutorial misconduct. What they were saying is that in the face of that evidence, the DPP, who has certain powers under the Constitution, ought to have discontinued the matter at that point. And the fact that the prosecution, the DPP advised the judge, listen, what you have to do is to give a direction to the jury so that it will cover any possible prejudices that may arise. So they in the Court of Appeal, they took the point that, listen, this amounts to prosecutorial misconduct. And what the Court of Appeal disagreed and in fact dismissed that ground of appeal. And they did so in the context of, listen, criminal matters are heard in an adversarial system. The prosecution seeks to secure a conviction based on the evidence, and the defense seeks to, first and foremost, ensure that the client receives a fair trial and to take all possible legal points favorable to the clients. So that's part of the adversarial system. So prosecutorial misconduct was rejected. And again, the issue of judicial misconduct, it was a judgment call for the judge, one, to end the trial, or two, to continue the trial and allow the jury to go in to deliberate. And of course, now it's 2020 vision hindsight. At the material time, weighing all factors, he decided to go with continuing the trial. And that would not amount, again, to judicial misconduct, because the, as I said, the Privy Council, even its ruling, expressed, as they refer to it, a measure of sympathy for the dilemma in which the judge found himself in after 64 days of trial, the possibility of all of that being scuttled on the final day. So while these are arguable issues, it does not necessarily mean, and in fact, I had occasion to read the judgment of the Court of Appeal. Yes. It was a very detailed judgment. In my opinion, it is recommended reading for all those involved in criminal matters, because they touched every single legal point probably came out of that case. And it was a very closely reasoned judgment, even though the Privy Council disagreed with them on that particular point. There, for example, the Court of Appeal's judgment was, I think, about 545 paragraphs. The Privy Council judgment was 69 paragraphs, because they concentrated solely on the juror misconduct issue.
Absolutely. Ruggles, we're going to get to some viewer questions here. A conversation has been happening in the comment section of the program while we were having this important conversation here, and I'll get to some of the viewer comments. First of all, you have compliments here from Mr. Michael Batiste. He's saying, first, let me congratulate you on your ascension to becoming a distinguished KC in this. And of course, he's saying further that this Vybz Kartel ruling is another example of why we in small island states should be concerned about the CCJ in our own jurisdiction. You had to invite the Judicial and Legal Service Commission to intervene in Grenada, where a jurist was sentenced. I'm not sorry, Michael, I'm not following. But I think what the crux of what Mr. Batiste is saying here is, Ruggles, that perhaps the Privy Council just demonstrated again why it should need to be continued our final court of appeal.
Yes, and I expect, in fact, In fact, there was a headline in the Daily Gleaner by one of the attorneys for the appellants, and the headline was "Long Live the Privy Council." What this demonstrates, you don't know what would have happened. For example, had this matter gone to the CCJ, and what I would say is that since 2005, when it was established, to date, that's for the past 19 years. Next month, the CCJ marks its 16th anniversary. And the CCJ, in fact, is known to have rendered excellent judgments recognized in the international community, both in its appellate and its original jurisdiction. So what I would say in relation to that is not necessarily having the Privy Council in place, but having a final appellate court to look over these matters. We have a 3-tier system. You have the High Court. Well, in this case, you also have the Magistrates Court, but this was a High Court case originating from Jamaica. The dissatisfied appellants went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal, and then the dissatisfied appellants were able to go to the Privy Council, and certainly the dissatisfied appellants were either able to afford the Privy Council, and two, get lawyers who were willing to carry it through at some special rate to get to the Privy Council, because the ordinary man cannot get its final matter appeal heard by the Privy Council. So I'm just saying that what I will prefer to say is the importance of an appellate process, the importance of people who are not directly involved in the hearing of the matter, as the learned trial judge was, to dispassionately at a distance at an appellate court, or at the first appellate court or the final appellate court looking at it. And let me say, it has nothing to do, these matters and the interpretation of law, and these matters have nothing to do with how bright the judge is or what. Because even at the final courts of appeal, you have 5 judges. At the High Court, you have 1, the trial judge. At the local court of appeal, you have 3. And at the Privy Council, you have 5. And sometimes, on the same point of law, you have the Privy Council with a majority decision of 3-2. They disagree even at that level. And that is why it is said, the final court is always right, not necessarily because it is right, but because it is the final court. If, for example, the matter had to go on to the next court, they might be reversed. But you must have finality in the system. And as I said, I had the opportunity to read the judgment of the Court of Appeal of Jamaica, and it was, a very lengthy judgment and very detailed judgment, and it is one that can be used as a precedent on many points of law. And that judgment, the president of that court was Dennis Morrison, who is recognized internationally for his intellect and his skill at judgment writing. And I suspected the judgment didn't reflect it. But based on how it was written, I suspect that he wrote this judgment. In fact, he passed away about a month or 2 ago. Dennis Morrison, but he's recognized as a fine legal mind internationally, not just in the region. So I'm saying all of this to say, it don't necessarily come down on a judge because that judge is reversed by a court of appeal, or that judge is reversed by the Privy Council. Because even at those levels, there are differences of interpretation.
Ruggles, Mr. Ferguson, Ruggles Ferguson, KC, there are other questions, but we quickly have to move on to the next segment. We do apologize for the choppy start to the program, and I do know that you will be dealing with this as part of a wider panel of attorneys on, is it the Legal Eagle?
Legal Eyes.
Legal Eyes.
Yes.
That's hosted by Mr. Lane, Joseph Hewitt Lane.
Yes.
Later this evening on this platform, I believe at 7 p.m., correct?
Yes, at 7 p.m. And in fact, one of the lawyers who represented the appellants, the first appellant, Shawn Campbell, and that's Bert Samuels, a very experienced lawyer in Jamaica of 45 years at the bar. He, in fact, would be part of that discussion. So, we look forward for fruitful discussion, and probably those who may have missed in this program, certain questions and issues may have the opportunity to raise it there, or it might even be dealt with before it's actually raised. But again, Kellon, well, thanks for having me. And really, this shows, as I always believe in, the importance of public education, and putting these rulings into context. And very importantly, it generates debates on several different issues of public interest, including, of course, the issue of the Privy Council versus the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Yes, it's interesting because I do get what some may say, legitimizing a colonial power final appellate court. I still view them as a colonial power final appellate court. And what it really shows, though, is that I think we need, as post-colonial independent states, we need to get our acts together if we are to claim to be independent, truly independent of our colonial oppressors. So I would end on that note, Ruggles. So thank you so much, sir,
thank you
for appearing on the Bub Report this week.
Yes, thank you, and good day to you and listeners and viewers.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, please stand by. We are going to return with the second segment of the Bub Report, and this will be an exclusive conversation that we'll be having with a citizen of Grenada, resident in the diaspora. This is the first time that she will be speaking to the media, at least in respect of what happened to her brother in November of 1980. Her brother, who was killed in November 1980 during the zenith of the Grenada Revolution, or should I say the nascent period of the Grenada Revolution. The family is still seeking justice for what occurred. They are yet to find justice in respect of what happened to their brother. We're also going to be speaking with a member of the Rastafarian community who was imprisoned and tortured by the Grenada Revolution back at the Hopevale prison, in St. George's. Many Rastafarians were, in fact, incarcerated in that space. We also invited Mr. Chester Humphrey, former Senate president, but also an activist of the Grenada Revolutionary period. He, in fact, was tortured and beaten by the Gary regime. The point of this segment is to have a reckoning over some of the untold stories of Grenada in the lead up to the revolution, as well as some of the harrowing incidents that occurred in the period of the revolution that still leaves many Grenadians hurting. So we're going to take a break, viewers and listeners, and come back for this very important conversation. Please remember to share this live stream so that others can have an opportunity to listen to the Bub Report. Please stand by.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. Now, we are following some breaking news developments that we're getting from St. George's in Grenada. And again, these are still unconfirmed reports, and we are going to work to ensure that we verify this. But unconfirmed now is that there has been allegedly a murder at the Radisson Hotel in the south of the island at one of the swimming pools, at the Sunset swimming pool this morning. The body of a deceased person has been recovered by Lacroix and Sons Funeral Home, and we are just getting this update here, and we are going to try and keep you in the loop in respect of this, so we understand, based on what we're just hearing, that the police came out with about 8 bags marked evidence. They drove off the Lacroix van in front. Allegedly, it does appear as if it may involve 2 students associated with the St. George's University. But we are keeping an update on this, and we would certainly bring you much more details on our social media pages once that information comes to hand. Now, let's get back to this week's program. Now, one aspect of the Grenada Revolution that few historians, academicians, or even sympathizers of the revolution have focused on is the pivotal role played by the Rastafarian Brethren of Grenada in its early days and their subsequent suffering under the People's Revolutionary Government. The Rastafari movement was the first group, a civil society group, to throw in their lot with the revolution. And without their grassroots support, it may have been difficult for the NJM to achieve what it achieved on the morning of March 13th, 1979. Now, the first images that the world saw of Grenada after March 13th were that of Rastafarian soldiers and it reflected the fact that 2/3 of the original PRA was in fact members of the Rastafarian movement. Now, all of that turned sour within months of the revolution, when many of the supporters of the Grenada Revolution, who were part of the Rastafarian movement, fell out of favor with the leadership of the People's Revolutionary Government and their ideology, and were all locked up at the infamous Hopevale prison in St. George's, where reports of torture occurred at the hands of soldiers attached to the People's Revolutionary Army. Also, one of the underreported events of the Grenada Revolution was the murder of 5 Grenadian citizens on November 17th and 18th in 1980 in Plain St. Patrick. The 5 men, Donald and Dennis Stanislaus, Andy Courtney, and Stephen Lousy. The funeral of these men were later held under heavy surveillance by the People's Revolutionary Army, but their killers still remain at large 43 years later. In fact, no one has come forward claiming responsibility for what happened to these men. According to the family, no formal investigation was conducted to determine who murdered these men in the first place. So this week, we speak to 2 citizens who experienced some of the tumultuous events of that era and are here to share their stories. I'm happy to be joined by Miss Margaret Lousy, who is, I believe, the sister of one of the men who died in 1980. Now, Miss Lousy, I know that we've been having conversations since last year. In fact, you reached out to us following our interview that we did in October of 2023, in which several other detainees spoke of their experiences in the revolution. And this is a conversation that was a long time coming. So we are certainly happy to have you here.
Good morning, Dr. Bob. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I don't remember getting in touch with you. I think Dennis put us in touch with each other.
Dennis, yes. So credit to Mr. Dennis Charles as well. Yes.
I'd like to say thank you for having me. Good morning to your listeners. And I'd like to correct something you said in the intro.
Sure. Yes, please.
Earlier on. I don't see myself as a victim, but a survivor.
We survive. Okay.
Yeah, we are survivors of the negative impact the revolution had on my life, the lives of the Stanislaus, the Evan Charles family, he's hardly spoken about, and the Courtney family. So I'm not here representing myself only. I'm here to speak about the innocent people also who was blamed and who was locked up in prison for a long time, some people longer than others. And it was something that the families all need answers to, you know. So that's why I'm here. I'm not here as a victim.
Absolutely. And I take that correction on board with good graces, certainly. So we also have Ras Logie, but Ras, I'm not too sure if you can hear us. I know we were having some technical issues with you. I'm not sure if you're able to turn your camera on, sir. But once we resolve those issues, we will certainly also have you on screen for this conversation. So, Ms. Lousy, let us talk about Stephen. So, Stephen is your brother, correct?
My adopted brother.
Your adopted
Stephen
brother,
actually, yes. My father's brother. But I came to Grenada to live with my grandparents at a very early age. And I lived with Stephen from age of 1 or before until his death in 1980. So we grew up together.
Yeah. So talk to us about Stephen. Talk to us about Stephen before that fateful morning, that fateful November morning in 1980. We understand he was a cadet. What was it about him that felt that he needed to engage in some kind of community and public service in Plain St. Patrick's?
Steve was a very giving person, a selfless person, just like the other young men. And we call them boys because they were so young when they died. So we call them our boys. You know, they looked around and noticed that there was a niche. There was nothing for the younger kids in the neighborhood to do. And in 1970, between 75 and 77, I was quite young, so I don't know when exactly the cadet corps started. But they did it because they wanted to engage the kids into the young people in the area of something positive. And that was when they formed the cadet corps. It was Donald Stanislaus. I think he was a police officer at that time. He came from a military background. His parents, his dad was a police officer. He had brothers in the police force, one who became the high commissioner at, police commissioner at one time. So there was always a sort of, not on Stephen's side, but on the Stanislaus side and the Courtney side, because Mr. Courtney was involved in the Gary police force under the Gary regime. So they were very popular. They were very likable. They were very positive thinkers. You know, they wanted better. And when the revolution came about, they had already started the cadet corps. There were I remember times when we would go to Fort Pasture in Sates to see the parades. We would cater for the food and everything for the parades, and so Eric Machugeri would be there. So that was before the revolution.
Very well, before the revolution. Yes, I'm here. So they clearly were doing things in the community before the revolution. Now, what happened after the revolution? Did they also decide to get involved with the new guard in town?
Everybody sort of got involved with the revolution the morning of the revolution. It was like, I think everybody was looking forward to something new because we were all tired of Gary and all the social and political uprising that was taking place at that time in the 70s. So the day of the revolution, leading up to the revolution, everybody, few people knew about it, but once it started, everybody was involved because everybody was looking forward to a positive change, something different. You know, so they carried on with the cadet corps as usual. What I've learned recently is that Donald was trained in the Sates militia because they have had that experience on the parades and everything leading up to the revolution. So they were asked to train the militia. I'm not sure about the politics of it all because, like I said, I was very young and I didn't know anything much about that. I didn't know anything much about army life, or I wasn't in the cadet corps. As much as I wanted to join, I wasn't allowed to. So a lot of the ins and outs on the political side, I don't really know. What happened after the revolution, the morning of the revolution, they came to our house, they took my dad's guns, went off, came back, handed them back a few days later, asked my dad how we could help. We cooked for the Sates soldiers until they established their camp, which would be Camp Villa. And everything was okay. It was a new high. The Rastas were going around with their guns. Everybody was listening to your next guest, Lobo, who is actually related to me. But at that time, we knew, but we had lost touch with each other. His song was all over the airways, Rasta Man, Rasta in a PRA. The next few months, we heard Rasta was in jail. So things started to unfold. I can't tell you, I have no time concept of this happened particularly when or anything. I can say it happened before Steve's death or after Steve's death because of all the confusion that it caused us in our emotions.
So let us fast forward to 1980, to November 1980. Yes. Did your brother Stephen talk about having any issues with anyone in the revolution? at that time? And anyone in the PRA or anyone in the
He
government,
did.
the People's Revolutionary Government?
He did, because after the revolution, things started to happen that we were quite surprised. Kenneth Budlal was arrested. Again, I can't tell you the time that everybody was arrested. Kenny Lal Singh was imprisoned. Tillman Thomas was in jail. A lot of Rastafarians were being picked up all over the place. So that I could not have understood. I did not know why they were being arrested. We were just hearing it every morning. You wake up, you would hear somebody else went to prison and all of that. But what happened, I walked in on a conversation one day, and I overheard Stephen telling my dad that they had asked them to join the cadet corps and make it a part of the army. And my dad said, "How do you feel about that?" And Steve said, "We decided we didn't want to." And my dad said, did you guys talk about it? And was the decision made collectively among you all? And he said, "Yes, we did. And we all unanimously agreed that we didn't want to join the cadet corps with the army." Right? I don't know if the other like Grenville was approached and St. George's was approached to do the same at that particular time. But the conversation I heard, Stephen was talking about their cadet coincidence and that they made the decision that they didn't want to join it. They wanted to remain as they were. And my dad said, and everybody agreed. And he said, "Yes, we all agreed." And my dad said to him, "Well, do what you think. Whatever makes you happy, whatever you wanted to do, whatever decision you made, just stick to it." And that came. Then I noticed he started to take different routes home. His behavior changed. He would be more cautious. He would say things, but I couldn't understand what he was talking about. But it would be sort of like revolutionary words. Then we saw, one morning I'd gone out of the house early, and I saw a big notice on a mango tree. So I went back to the house and I said, it had big words on it, but rain had fallen that night, so the ink had run on the paper. And I got back home and I said to them, "There's a big notice on the mango tree down the road." And my dad said, "What notice?" And I said, "I don't know. It has some funny words on it." And he goes, "Words like what?" And I said, "Words like counter and counter-revolution, or words along them lines, something that made me realize that something was going on with the revolution. It was to do with the revolution. It had nothing to do, you know, back then they used to put the plaques up there and the paper up, the hard copy A4 paper up and advertise dances and stuff. So when you see something like that, you'd stop and read. But this was no advertisement for no dance or anything. It was just some military words. So Steve said to me, he sent somebody to get the paper. He sent somebody off to get the paper off the tree. And when they brought the paper home, he said to me, to all of us, because it was breakfast time, and he said to all of us that when he walked past last night, somebody was in the bush, and he knows for a fact it was somebody, because his friend would not, whose land it belonged to, he would not leave his animals out at night. So he knew it was someone who was in the bush. It wasn't a goat or a sheep or a cow or anything. And he ran home, and he said, just as he got in, it started to rain. So he said to me that the paper was placed there just before he walked past. And that was why when he got home, the paper was, the ink had dripped on it because the rain had just fallen. And I was quite impressed because I thought he was so intelligent. I never really thought anything could have happened to him. Then he sold his bike. Then he would take, like I said, different means. Excuse me 1 minute. Let me get this out.
Yes. And viewers and listeners, we are speaking with Margaret Lousy. That's the brother of Stephen. Go ahead. Yes.
Yes. So yeah, things change. But like I said, I wasn't privy to a lot of it. He would more confide in my dad.
Mm-hmm.
When he turned 20 on the 5th of May in 1980, we had a party for him. And at that party, I can't tell you who was there, but there was a lot of people there. There would have been cadet members, because the cadet was still going. They would have had militia, members from the militia there. They would have soldiers there, and friends and family and schoolmates. But in my brain, I just can't figure out who was there. And my dad made a speech and everything, and Stephen stood up to say a few words. And what he said really shocked us all. It came for me like a bolt out of the blue. He said, and I quote, "Something's gonna happen for me this year. Either I travel and get married or I die. But if I die, I'll be dying with my boots on and bullets in my chest, not in my back, because I would not be running away." We were floored. Honestly, I was floored. And now I'm thinking about it. Stephen would not have made that remark if somebody in the room, somebody who was present at his birthday celebration, did not know what he was speaking about. Do you understand? It would make no sense to make remarks to a room full of people who had no clue what it meant. So that proves to me that whoever was threatening him was there. Do you understand?
Yes.
And I felt sort of like shocked, but wow, he was so brave and he was so strong and he was so, he, no matter how tall Stephen we would have grown to, we would always have looked up to him because he was that sort of a person. We had a lot of respect for him and he had a lot of love for us. Not only not only his family, the whole community. You ask anybody about Stephen and they say his nickname was Wafer because he always gave his friends wafers. And even after he died, his schoolmate said to me, he always wanted to know who Stephen's family were. He never knew us. And when I said to him, I said his nickname was Wafer, and he said, "Wafer?" I said, "Yeah." I said, because he used to give his friends wafers. And he said to me, "He gave me a wafer too." And I said, "Well, you are his friend." He was a gem. The love he had for his family and just his friends, and take her out of here for me, please. And his friends and the whole community was not just him. All the boys were like that. Andy was only 17, so he was younger than all of them. He was 3 years younger than Stephen. So he had a very protective nature. He had a very loving way about him. He made all his friends feel comfortable. He made all his friends feel welcome, and nothing was too much for him to do for anybody, just like the others. That's why they tried to help the young people, help them in a positive way, and that's all this was. They had no affiliation to the government, to Gulp. They had no affiliation they used to march with empty guns, just old wooden guns. They had no political affiliation whatsoever. So their killing came as a shock to us. Even though Stephen made he said those words, I don't think we really understood what he was telling us, because my dad could have sent him away at any time.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, let us go on. Of course, Alistair Hughes, the late, great Alistair Hughes, who at the time was a journalist, he was also arrested, by the way, by the Grenada Revolution. And,
yes,
and I make the point that I may have been also arrested and jailed by the Grenada Revolution.
Yeah.
I
No one was
I try to hold
as
power
far as
to
I
account.
looking back, no one was off
Yeah,
limits. Oh
yeah,
yeah,
right.
you would have
So
been in jail.
absolutely. So
No
now
doubt.
I'm going to share. Alistair Hughes' report on the killing,
Did you
and then we're
find
going to
it?
talk about. I did find it, yes,
Oh, okay.
and credit to Mr. Charles for that. But I'm going to share Mr. Hughes's report. Of course, Mr. Hughes published at the time the Grenada newsletter. That is what he published at the time. So I will go ahead and share what Mr. Hughes reported on in respect of this particular tragedy in St. Patrick. He goes between late Monday night and early Tuesday morning, November 17th to 18th, counter-revolutionary elements in St. Patrick's committed one of the most brutal murders experienced in Grenada. At about 11:30 p.m. Monday night, they, of course, the writing, the text is very small. But the point of me sharing this particular article here is to set the scene for us. I want you to recall what happened moments before your brother was murdered on that morning.
At night.
That night, sorry, yes.
That night. Myself and we had a Students' Day rally in St. George's that day. And I attended. I saw Stephen. I saw the 4 boys there. About 3 times in St. George's, we spoke. And maybe about 2 o'clock, they said to me that they were going back up to the country because Dennis, who was visiting from London, was leaving on the following Sunday, which would be the 23rd, which turned out to be the day that he was buried, and that I would see them later. Myself and Donna were very close. He hugged me and everything, and they said bye. They left me in town, and they drove back over to Queen's Park. So when I got back to the park, I saw them there. I said to him, I thought you said you were going home. And he said to me, oh, we just came here. He told me the reason why. And then I watched them drive off, and I went away. I got home about 7 o'clock that evening. Stephen was not home. My dad told me that they had gone out, and he had asked me to do some little bits for him before he come back at night, and that he wouldn't be long. Got home at 7, had my shower and everything, did what I had to do, and went into bed. About 10 to 11. It wasn't 11:30. It wasn't 10:30. At about 10 to 11, my dad came into my bedroom and he called me and he said, are you up? And I said, yeah, what's wrong? He said to me, I'm a bit worried because Stephen isn't home yet. And I said, oh, Dad, don't worry. It's only 10 o'clock. He'll be home soon. And he said to me, no, it's not 10. It's almost 11. I said, oh, he'd be home soon. Don't worry. Go back to bed. He left in the room. No, he didn't leave. Sorry. He sat on the bed next to me and he had this really worried look because all of this counter-revolutionary thing was going on and they were looking for Duck and them for shooting, I think, some incident where he had shot somebody called Simon Lane. So they're already looking for him. So while we were sitting there, we had 2 military vehicles speeding up the road. I mean, breakneck speed. We could hear the tires screeching at every corner. And being a driver, you would be able to tell where they are by the way they change their gears. They got up to the top of Rose Hill, and we could hear them change their gears, and they're going down towards Plains. And a couple of minutes after, we had, get off, sorry, you know, AK-47 gunshots. Mm-hmm. And it carried on for what seems like ages, much longer than we had ever heard before. And myself and my dad, we just sat there. We didn't say anything to each other. But in my mind, I thought it happened in the bushes where the soldiers were looking or they were training, militia training or whatever. So I didn't see I didn't see anything suspicious. Sorry.
You are multitasking. Is that your granddaughter, your grandson?
My cat.
Oh, your cat. Okay.
My
Go ahead. It's okay. It's okay.
So, yeah. So we sat there, we heard all the gunfire and everything, and then it went quiet for about 30 seconds. And then it started again, and it stopped. Started again for about half a minute, and then it stopped, and it went quiet. My dad left the room. He went back into his room, and I fell asleep. About 2 o'clock in the morning, he came back into my room, and this time he woke me up, and he said to me, Meg, Stephen still isn't home yet, and I'm getting worried. He's got to go to school in a couple hours' time. Natu is coming to pick him up. So I said to him, what's the time? And he said to me, it's about 2 o'clock. And he said, something's wrong, something's not right. He went back, he left me back in my bed, and he went back out into the dining room, and I can hear him drinking, he's pouring drinks. And I said to him, you're not supposed to be drinking, you're diabetic, you really shouldn't drink. Anyway, I dozed off, woke up again, and 5 o'clock my dad came back into the room, maybe about 5:15. And he said to me, I said, Dad, you drunk? And he said to me, well, I had a few, I needed a few stiffeners. I need to brace myself for some news to come. And as he said, no, I said to him, I said, they must have had an accident somewhere and they don't have a phone. I was really naive, I couldn't hook everything up together at that age. I couldn't figure it out. So I thought, well, maybe they had an accident and they couldn't get to their phone, and that's why he hasn't called my dad to say anything. And a couple seconds after the phone rang, and he said to me, that's the news I'm waiting for. He went and he answered the phone, and I stood I was hanging onto the door, thinking, what news gonna come? And I just heard my dad said, all of them? And the person must have said yes, and he said, pick me up. And he turned around and he said to me, Megs, Stephen's gone. And I thought, what do you mean gone? And he said, yeah, he's dead, all of them. I don't remember much after that. I could remember hearing like people screaming in the neighborhood, and my dad, Mr. St. John, who was on the other end of the phone, picked up my dad and took him to Plains. And then I left the house and this is so crazy. Walked out the road and met the driver who would pick Steve up to take him to school in the morning. And he stopped and he asked me what's going on. And I said, well, I don't know, but you wouldn't get Steve at home. He's in Plains. And he said, what's he doing in Plains? I said, I heard he's dead in Plains. So he put me in the car and we went down to Plains, and we saw them all there. Just people surround the car, people screaming, the bullets on the floor, and they're just there. I sent the pictures to you. One of them was outside of the car on the floor with his head at the foot of the door. And I said to my dad, why did they cut them? Because they had like big cuts and stuff on their hands from what I now realize is closely shot. They were shot at close range. That was why the bullets would have ripped their skin. And my dad said to me, Meg, I don't know. And that was it. We never discussed it after that. And we just, we didn't know. We didn't, I forgot everything that I had heard the night before. I think the shock and everything of what I had seen and what had just happened. And I could remember the day, like people were coming to the house. I left the scene. I went back there. I had to see again. And they removed their bodies and they took them to town. That's basically what I remember. I could remember walking a lot. I don't remember where or why. It was like alone. I just was alone. I can't explain. I can't put it into words, but because a lot of it I can't remember. But then I remember people coming to the house, and the day after, Daddy had to go and identify his body.
Mm-hmm.
When he came back, I don't know when the news broke that he was shot 19 times, and one of the bullets had gone through his shoulder, his right shoulder, and came out underneath his left arm, and that was the bullet that had killed him. And he was lying in the back of the car behind Donald, and he was Stephen threw his body over him. So I heard the Courtney family told me that Andy got the top of his head blown out. Mr. Courtney had to go and identify his body. I remember some political somebody came to the house and asked if they can all be buried together as a state funeral. But my dad had already known that it was soldiers, it was PRA soldiers. He was told that it was PRA soldiers that had done it. He didn't share that information with us because he thought it was probably too dangerous to let us know what had really transpired and who he thought was behind it. Plus, it was a time when you really couldn't speak about anything out in the open. So he had to hold whatever he knew to himself. And whoever was giving him information, he could not let anyone know that this information was coming from that particular person, because they would have probably been arrested. What happened? They called one day and said, can we bring the cadet clothes in? Because they were burying them on the Sunday. So they were buried on Sunday, the 23rd of November. We got into Satés the morning of the funeral. We brought the clothes in, and they didn't ask us if we wanted anything, if we had any plans of how we wanted the funeral to go. It was just 5 coffins in the church in front of the priest. We turned up, and they opened the boxes. We could have seen them. We saw them, and but the one whose eyes were dug out, the Evan Charles, his coffin could not be opened because of how his body was
mangled, I suppose, and disfigured from the bullets.
The newspaper clipping, his eyes were dug out. He was killed in the most vicious way because they wanted to blame it on the counter-revolutionaries that they were looking for. I don't think any investigation was done.
Yes.
I saw what I witnessed after the funeral. They buried them under a hail of 21 gun salutes. I remember Bernard Code was there. Leon Cornwall was there. His face haunted me for years. We were treated like the enemy. I felt like I was the enemy. I don't know why, but I couldn't sense what was going on because it seemed like I had lost. I'd lost my. How do I put it? I'd lost my way. I'd lost thinking. I couldn't think. I couldn't figure out. It was silent. I never heard anything. I never saw anything. That was because nothing was registering. You understand? It was there. It was all there, but it wasn't registering. I was in a confused state of mind. Even when my dad told me before the invasion, he said it in front of soldiers, "Come here now," because they've put their guns to me. 3 years after, I know I've jumped a bit, but 3 years after, my dad said to me that, "Meg, what's the matter with you? Come here now. Can't you see they've killed one already?" I couldn't figure out that was what my dad was telling me, that these are the soldiers who had killed the boys in Plains 3 years before. I was in such a emotional mess, a psychological mess. I could not figure out what had gone on back then, what was going on now. I just didn't know. So when he told me that in front of them, they looked up at him and they drove off. But then they drove off only because they knew the Americans were coming in. And my dad knew that the Americans were coming in because we were close friends to the Hughes family. Betty Maskell, who was Alistair Hughes' sister-in-law, was a very close friend of my family. So we knew that the Americans were coming in, the invasion was impending. We knew that. So he felt like when he saw what they were doing to me, they all put their guns down to me like that and saying to me, I can kill you and I can kill you. Don't you know there's a curfew? And I said, all I did, and I was about 50 yards from my house. I said, all I come here to do is collect my dog. And they said to me, get off the road before we shoot you. And that was when my dad looked out and he said, Meg, come here now. Can't you see they've killed one already? So over the years, we've heard that the soldiers were the ones who did it. We've been hearing all sorts of different stories that it was soldiers from St. George's because some had left Pearls that evening and come up to Saturdays. We have no idea. All I can say is 2 PRA vehicles sped up the road before we heard the gunshots go off. So if we stayed at home and we heard the gunshots, how come the soldiers on the vehicles didn't hear it? They didn't hear it. And why when I spoke to Warner, who was the head of the camp in Saturdays, Mr. Dave Tan Bartholomew, I did ask him some questions one time. And he was very kind to answer and give me as much information as he could have. He told me that no soldiers left the Saturdays camp that night. I said to him, I asked him specifically if Doc and them were driving military vehicles, and he said no. So I said, so the 2 vehicles that sped past that night, where did they come from? He said he doesn't know. We've been hearing a lot on the internet, but like I say, the question is, if the PRA vehicles had sped up the road and Doc and them were shooting the boys in planes, how come they didn't hear it? How come we had to wait until 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning to find the boys' bodies on the road? And when I asked him that, he couldn't answer. He had no answer for that. You know, so all fingers right now is pointing to the army. I know
elements of the People's Revolutionary Army. Yes,
the army.
Just to be
and
clear.
Everybody who I've spoken to in London as well have told me Doc and them had nothing to do with this. Evan Charles was killed at 5 o'clock in the morning. Why would Doc and them kill Steve and them at 11 o'clock? And we know someone killed the boys at 11 because we heard the gunshots. So that cannot be disputed. So why would Doc and them hang around in the same neighborhood from 11 o'clock at night and think, oh, let us go to kill this boy at 5 o'clock in the morning? It doesn't make sense, does it? It makes no sense whatsoever. If you kill somebody or you kill people, the first thing you do is escape from the scene. And I wouldn't see them going back to Mount Rich and then think, you know, we forgot the one at the camp. Let's go back down and kill him. It doesn't make sense. We want to know what happened. My father died without knowing. Mrs. Stanislaus died without knowing. Mrs. Courtney is still there. So is Evan Charles' mom. And she found something out recently that someone had told me. She found out that her son was killed by the army and she was given a piece of land as compensation. That's what I've learned recently. I remember her there the day of the funeral. I remember she couldn't even touch her son in the coffin because he was under glass. And if you read the newspaper, they said his testicles were cut off. I don't know. But he had to be under glass. He had to be buried under glass. And what she found out recently, I don't know the fullness of, but she found out, like I found out. Shut the door back for me, please, because the cats keep opening it. I found out recently that the boy was killed at 5 o'clock, and I found that out from a newspaper clipping that came from Jamaica. They were the ones who raised the question as to the time that Evans was killed. And the ones who did the autopsy were the ones who would have let the newspaper know that Stephen was shot 19 times. They didn't say it was him, but we know it was him because Dr. Japal and Dr. Jensen Otway were the ones who did the autopsy, and Dr. Japal is my dad's relative. So that's how we know. He was arrested sometime after. We got a message one morning saying that he was arrested by Peter David and others, and he was thrown on the vehicle and taken to jail. I saw him after he came. I saw him when he went into the hospital, General Hospital, for treatment. I got the opportunity to visit him, and it was really sad. It was sad. I only figured out as an adult that Dr. Japal was not involved in no revolutionary activity. He and who would have overthrown the PRG? Nobody. The only reason he went to prison, because he was stopped and searched on the way into Stephen's funeral, into the boy's funeral on Sunday, the 23rd of November. On his way into the church, he was stopped, he was searched. They searched his vehicle, they searched his person before they let him into the church. Why would that be necessary? I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Some of the names that have been mentioned is shocking.
Yeah. And so following the collapse of the revolution, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the early 2000s, which I thought was an attempt at getting to answers in respect of a lot of these incidents that happened. But it does appear as if there are still so many unresolved issues around that period. There are still so many unanswered questions. There is still so much trauma.
No, there is.
You know,
some have never made it back.
That at some point we have to get to a reckoning, but it does appear as if for your family and for the Stanislaus family, as well as for the Courtney family, closure is very far away, and closure is still a very difficult proposition for you all.
Well, what I've heard recently is that a government body of some sort had approached, I think her name is the lady whose house it happened right in front of, in Plains, Miss Kathleen. I don't remember her surname now. I heard that a few people had gone and asked her to say, give any information she have, if she can give it, speak about it so the families can get closure. And she said she would never talk about it. So if she is refusing to talk about it, and this is 40 something years after, why? If Doc and them are supposed to be the culprits and they got killed, she knows they're killed, why is she scared to speak about it? Doesn't make sense. None of it makes any sense.
Could it be that the trauma of that period, perhaps maybe she does not want to relive that as well? I'm just putting that out there. I don't know if that's the case, but
somehow I don't think that is the case. I think she knows who the people really are. She knows that it wasn't who they say it is. I think she knows, but she doesn't want to say it because her husband, I heard, was arrested, and I don't know what happened. They were in a haste to kill Doc and them. So they killed them without doing any investigation. I heard that they hired the police commissioner at that time was James Clarkson, right? In 1980, it was supposed to be James Clarkson. What I learned recently is that when Ian St. Bernard died. At his funeral, they said that Ian was the high commissioner, the police commissioner. So he was the member of the PRA. I don't know. I don't know what to believe, because over the years we've heard so many things. We've heard names called from St. George's. We've heard names called from Sates. We've heard names called from all over Grenada. And we don't know. What that is to us is like emotional rape. It's equivalent to being raped and you don't know who's raped you. But you've been raped. And you live around the same people. Because we don't know. We have no idea. They told us it was the PRA. They were trying to kill Tan. No, sorry. They told us it was Duck and them. They were trying to kill Tan. Yeah? But who were the vehicles? Who were driving the vehicles that went past my house at night? I don't know. We have no idea. They went up to Montreal and they arrested the entire Pascal family. People I went to school with. I saw my friends go to jail over something that, okay, let's say Duck and them had done it. Why is the whole of Montreal paying for what Duck and them did? That should never be allowed to happen. People have rights. Just like how whoever investigated did not really investigate. They just made their mind up. That's the narrative they wanted to put out there, that it was them, and they killed them, and they would go with their story. But over the years, I've heard that some person from the PRA had went to Mr. Courtney and confessed to the boys' killing. Mr. Courtney already died, and Bernard Code actually told me that. And then Mr. Courtney's daughter did say to me, yes, her dad told her that, but he never mentioned the soldier who had come there to ask for forgiveness. So I don't know. All I can say is they're still walking around. And I don't think Duck and them did this, because Duck and them is not so stupid to kill somebody at 11 o'clock and hang around like a bad smell and come back and kill somebody at 5 o'clock. It doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it's not true. It's not true. Yeah. I'm not here looking for anything except Mrs. Courtney and Mrs. Charles, Miss Charles, Evan Charles' mom. I'm over this. I'm over this in the sense that the worst is over. I'm still work in progress. I have days that's rough and days that's okay. But it's really painful to see that a lot of people didn't get justice when they were dealt such a cruel hand. A lot of people didn't get to tell their side of the story. The story was told for them, and a lot of it is lies. You can't tell me that someone got killed. Okay, these 4 boys got killed. You went to Montreal, you arrested a mother, her daughter, her granddaughter, a baby, and her dumb son who can't speak. What's he gonna tell you? He can't tell you anything. How? So today we still don't know, and it's still bothering the Courtney family. Like I said, my mom and dad, my dad drank alcohol, copious amount of alcohol to see him through this. My grandmother, my mother was on marijuana. That was how we survived. That was how my parents survived. And I don't come from a home that knows anything about weed. Nothing. But that was my mom's coping mechanism
at the time. Yes. Margaret, let me thank you. I know that this was a difficult decision that you had to make to come speak publicly about this. I also know that other members of the other families also are still hurting, and so it's very difficult for them to also come forward to speak about this. So I thank you. I thank you for agreeing to sit with us to tell the story, because in you telling this story publicly, hopefully those who have information that can lead to justice for these 5 young men. I hope that something comes out of this conversation that we've had, but it's more critically important for us to put the Grenada Revolution into its proper context. Yes. And it's also important for us to put the Grenada Revolution into its proper context. It was, yes, the revolution had many
its good
accomplishments.
Sides. Oh, yes,
but
indeed.
There is also a very dark, dark and violent underbelly to the revolution that I myself am coming to grips with.
It's very unfair to not have justice when, okay, the bomb blast in Queen's Park, we know who did it according to they went to prison, they killed Sean Phillip. Everybody had justice. Maybe they didn't go to jail long enough. They should have. You know, unfair and unfair, it doesn't matter who does it. Wrong is wrong. And if the wrong person is innocently done for a crime, then that is not justice. That's an injustice. Not just for the people who've lost, but the people who's been judged and the people who's been locked up. That's an injustice. So I'm not here just for me. I'm over this. I'm over this in the sense that I've accepted that he's gone. I couldn't accept it at first because that was my way of coping with it, you know. So for me, it doesn't bother me anymore. I miss him in my life because he was the glue that held our family together, just like the other families, you know. But I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for Miss Courtney, who's still struggling. I'm doing this for me, the mother of Evan Charles. For me, Stephen is gone. I have some lovely memories. God blessed me with him in my life, and it is what it is. I've accepted, but I want closure for Mrs. for the parents of the boys. That's what I want.
That closure is so critical. There is so much closure that needs to be happen that is not happening, and we here at the Bub Report will continue to reach out to folks who were aggrieved during this period, because we do believe that it is important to have a reckoning with that part of our history and not whitewash the history.
I think so.
The way that we attempt to whitewash the Grenada Revolution, the way that there is this hero worship of politicians associated with the revolution, as well as with the Gary regime, I think it is extremely problematic. We have to put all of the cards on the table in respect of their legacies, problematic as though it may be as well. Yes,
I think so too. We are blessed to have them in our lives, and they've done so much for the community and got nothing in return, but their memory lives on. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for listening, and have a blessed day to you and your listeners. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Ms. Lousy, thank you so much for appearing on the Bub Report. And you were strong. You were strong. I honestly didn't know what to expect, because based on the conversation that we were having, but I certainly thank you for joining us today.
And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Have a blessed day. Take care.
Yes, you too as well.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you so much. Viewers and listeners, Miss Margaret Lousy. She is the sister of the deceased Stephen Lousy. Stephen Lousy, who was one of the victims killed in November 1980. Of course, the people responsible for their murder have yet to be held accountable. No one has come forward to accept or claim responsibility for not only his murder, but the murder of Donald and Dennis Stanislaus, as well as Andy Courtney. And so the purpose of this conversation was, again, to have a reckoning with that part of our untold part of Grenadian history in the context of the Grenada Revolution. Ras Logie, we do apologize. We were trying to have you on the stream, but we were having some technical issues with your cell phone there, sir. And so we will definitely be doing a part 2 with you once we have those technical kinks resolved for next week's edition of the Bub Report. I will be calling you right after the program, sir. But we also had Mr. Ras Logie with us. Unfortunately, we were unable to have him live on air because there were some issues with his camera. But viewers and listeners, on behalf of the producers, my hardworking producer, I would say one producer whose name I can mention publicly, Rian Charles. We thank you for being avid viewers and participants of the Bub Report, and we will see you next week for another edition of the program. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me have a much more than diplomatic passport. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just keep quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.